Look what I woke up to this morning. Yep, it spilled over the jar. On the one hand, it's like, oh man, that stinks. And on the other hand, it's like, yay, it's rising really well in the jar. We have some smallish to medium-ish sized bubbles. We can definitely expect to see a lot bigger bubbles along the side as our starter matures more. But I think we're going to go ahead and use this starter today to make bread. So the recipe that we're using today comes from the From Scratch cookbook by Shay Elliott. I actually adapted it to be sourdough. I was going to make sourdough crackers the other day, so that's why it's on this page. It ended up not doing it. We had a sheep emergency for a friend. But this is her recipe, Eat, Drink, and Be Merry bread. It's a basic a basic yeast recipe, but I've just adapted it for sourdough by replacing the yeast with sourdough, and it comes out really well pretty much every time. I use whole wheat flour with it. I use all-purpose flour with it. Sometimes I bake it the same day. Sometimes I put it in the refrigerator to rest overnight, and then I'll bake it the next day. And because this time around with my sourdough starter, I intentionally fed it in 1 cup increments. I did that so that I would have enough starter to be able to make you both all-purpose flour bread and whole wheat flour bread. So you can kind of see the difference in the doughs, in the shaping, in the rise, in the crumb, all of that kind of thing. And I also, this recipe makes 2 loaves. So I'm going to make 2 loaves of whole wheat bread, 2 loaves of all-purpose flour bread, and one of each of those loaves I will bake today, like just it proofs today and I bake it today, and one of each of those loaves I'm going to put in the refrigerator and then bake it tomorrow. So again, you can kind of see the differences and just have a little experiment here. So let's get started. Let's do the whole wheat bread first. All right, so for the whole wheat bread, we're going to start off with 3 cups of water. And there are other recipes that use grams, but I learned on cups, and so that's what I still do. I just pour in a splash of olive oil. I find with whole wheat, a little bit of olive oil and a splash of honey, a little bit of honey helps with the density of the bread. So we're going to put that in. I was almost out of olive oil and honey too this morning, so I have just enough for the bread. Next, I'm going to take my sourdough starter and do 1 cup of sourdough starter. Some people will stir theirs up before they use it. I honestly don't do it. Look how frothy and bubbly that is. So, nice bubbly sourdough starter. Pour that in there. So I'm going to mix that in. And now that I've done that, I'm going to add in 6 cups of whole wheat flour. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Into the top of my whole wheat flour, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of salt. Oops. Pour some of that back in there. I always guess on my salt. I never use like little spoon measurements. It's always fine. Okay. And I'm not adding the salt directly on top of the sourdough starter because that can inhibit some of the yeast activity. Instead, I put it on top of my flour. And some people, they'll even wait to add the salt. They'll mix up everything else except for the salt, and then they'll come back in, like an hour and add the salt. I find that if I do that, I tend to forget about adding the salt. And saltless bread is nasty. It's good for nothing. So don't forget the salt ever. And so I'm just going to mix this up here with my hand. I start in the center and then make my way out. I highly recommend using your hand to mix your doughs. And the reason why is because when you mix with a spatula or a spoon, you can't tell just how hydrated the flour is. We want our dough, every bit of flour, to be wet, but it doesn't need to be like soggy. And it's just hard to tell if everything is wet. With a spatula, you might think that it's more dry than it actually is because it's not being incorporated properly. So I'm just kind of like picking up the side and turning it in and turning my bowl at the same time. Just kind of mixing it all together. So with your whole wheat flours, you really kind of want more of a wet dough. Not soupy wet, but this is like, definitely you can pick it up. It kind of has shape to it, but it's still wet. It's not a dry dough, okay? It's not a smooth dough either. It's pretty shaggy. But as we come back over the next couple of hours and stretch and fold this, which I'll show you how to do, you're going to see this gluten really start to form some nice strands and come together in just a really nice dough ball, okay? So that's it for mixing up our whole wheat flour. Now let's do our all-purpose flour bread. I'm going to cover this and set it to the side. All right, so now for the all-purpose flour, I'm going to do pretty much the same process. 3 cups of water. Then I'm going to do my sourdough starter, 1 cup of sourdough starter. This is going to be a scant 1 cup because I had so much overflow overnight. Well, looks like we're only going to have a half cup, but I bet you it still works. And you'll see I just have like the edges and like what's coating the bottom in here, and yet this is going to be enough to get my sourdough starter going still. I'm just going to feed what little bit is in there, and that's going to work. Okay, mix this sourdough and water up. Okay, next, 6 cups of flour. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This recipe is so easy to remember because it's the 6 cups of flour, 3 cups of water, 1 cup of starter, 1 tablespoon of salt. It's like just easy. The numbers are easy to remember. Because 3 is half of 6, and then the 1 is the same, so I don't know. Okay, adding my tablespoon of salt on top. You can use pink salt, you can use a sea salt, anything like that's just fine. All right, mixing up the salt first into the flour. Let me scoop this a little bit. And now mixing the flour into the water and the starter. Technically, this bread is a little bit whole wheat because my starter is whole wheat, but it's going to act like an all-purpose flour bread. So I think it's a good side-by-side comparison. Of course, we also have the issue of not having enough starter to make 1 cup of starter for this recipe, but it's going to be okay. Like, I'm so happy that stuff like that is happening, though, in this video, because you'll get to see that it is going to come out just fine. And so when you're baking bread and you're like, oh, this is not quite the same, or that's not quite the same, you'll say, oh, well, I'll bake it anyway, and it'll come out just fine. Okay, so we're done mixing up our dough. And again, it's wet, it's tacky, it's sticky, but as we come back to it throughout the day, for the next couple of hours, it's really going to come together, and you'll see how it becomes more smooth and elastic and really looks like a bread dough. Okay, so let's cover this and let it sit out. Let's feed our starter now, and as you can see, I just have the edges and like that very little bit at the bottom, not much at all. It's like maybe a tablespoon, and that is enough to leave behind to be able to restart this sourdough starter. If you use up all your sourdough starter and all you have are the edges and just a very thin layer at the bottom, go ahead and feed it. Those yeast are going to love all the flour you give them. Your starter is probably going to end up being stronger because of it, honestly, and it's going to be just okay. You did not just use up all your sourdough starter and now you have to restart a new one and it's over and all that kind of thing. Just feed it and keep going. So I'm going to feed this. I'm thinking because it is so little, I'm not going to feed like a whole cup. Probably going to feed it like, let's do a half a cup of flour, and then I'm going to give it maybe a fourth a cup of water. As I'm stirring in the flour and the water, I'm probably going to add the water gradually just so I can see the thickness, because I do want a thicker starter than I have had. Remember when I came home from Sabbath and the house was really warm, and my starter, I came over to it, it had already risen and fallen, and there's a large layer of liquid on top. Liquid, I don't know if it's water or water and other things, probably water, not other things, is a byproduct of the fermentation process. So if you were to feed your starter and it were to peak and to fall quickly and then not be fed very soon afterwards, then it's going to have all of that water byproduct, which in turn will make your starter more runny. And that's what has happened with my starter. It's nothing wrong, you know, you can either stir that liquid in, which is what I did in the video, and then I just made stuff from it, or you can pour that liquid off and keep your starter a little thicker. There's nothing wrong with having a little bit runny of a starter, but I just find I get better yeast activity if I keep my starter on the thicker side. So I'm going to go ahead and do the fourth cup of water and a half a cup of flour, but I'm going to add the water gradually just so I can make sure I'm keeping my starter thicker. Okay, so let's do half a cup of flour. Look at the water. Fourth a cup of water, but I'm just going to stir it in a little bit at a time. Yeah, so that's all of the fourth a cup of water. Let's stir it in and see. Yeah, that's nice and thick, really thick actually. Can you see how thick that is? Let me see if I can smooth it out. It's almost like a dough itself. Let me see. You can see how thick it is. But I'm actually going to let it just be that thick, because like I just mentioned in the fermentation process, there is that byproduct of water or liquid, and so this is not going to be this thick when I come back to it. If it is, I'll be very surprised, and if it is not, it's still okay. I'll just, when I feed it next, I'll add a little bit more water. Don't fret with sourdough. It wants to make bread for you. So just remember that. It's on your side. All right, day 5 starter is fed. We've got some bread going. My jar is looking really gnarly already. You can change your jar out whenever you like. But I am going to come back in 30 minutes to 45 minutes and stretch and fold this dough, and I'll take you along for that. It's been 45 minutes, and so now we're going to do our first set of stretch and folds on both of our doughs here. Let me show you how that's done. I wet my hand, and then I take my dough and I pick it up on one side, pull it up, and bring it to the center. Then I turn my bowl, pick it up on the next side, pull it up, put it in the center. It'll break apart a little bit right now because it's not really developed yet. Pull it to the center, turn, pick it up, pull it to the center. So I just do all 4 sides. Sometimes I might even do one side again. Sorry, guys, everyone quiet down for just a second. Sorry for the pandemonium. Cousins are over babysitting today. And you can already see it starting to take on a different look, not looking as shaggy after just that first stretch and fold. And this is just really going to change every time we stretch and fold it. Now I'm going to do the all-purpose flour dough. So I'm going to go wet my hand again real quick. My hand is wet, so I pick up one corner, pull it up, stretch it to the center. This actually is doing way better than the whole wheat, but that's because it's all-purpose. All-purpose flour does tend to be a little bit easier to work with than the whole wheat with all the bran and stuff. Pick it up, stretch it, so I've done all 4 sides. And again, you can see it's really looking more like a smooth dough. I'm going to come back every 30 to 45 minutes-ish and do the same process with my stretch and folds. I could even go like up to an hour. and of waiting. Or, I mean, I've done even longer than that. Usually I don't set a timer or anything. I'm just like, as I think about it, oh, I think it's been 30 minutes. I think it's been 45 minutes. I'm going to go stretch and fold it. But you can set a timer if you want to. And sometimes I set a timer if I know that I'm going to be really distracted that day or doing things outside of the home, like in the garden or whatever. Then I will set a timer and just do every 45 minutes. I'm going to do these stretch and folds 4 times. So this was the first set. I'm going to come back 45 minutes later, do a second set, come back 45 minutes later, do a third set, come back 45 minutes later and do a 4th set. And then this is just going to sit on the countertop. So I'm not going to record every single time I do those because it's literally what I just showed you, the same exact thing. But I will show you what it's looking like. Like I said, I'm babysitting the cousins. So there's 7 kids all together, and I just don't think I'm going to be able to record very well with the noise and everything because my phone's also acting weird with the sound for some reason. Anyhow, lots of things going on. So I'll just show you what it looks like as we progress with the stretch and folds, but I'm not going to record all of the stretch and folds. See you toward the end. By the way, my house is at 73 degrees today, so that you know, as you see my dough proofing, you can know what the temperature in the house was. It wasn't too hot, it wasn't too cold, kind of just right there in between. Stretch and fold number 2, stretch, fold, stretch, fold, stretch, fold, and last side, stretch. Oops, I'm doing this with one hand and fold. Might do this side one more time. I just like it to be all nice and neat. You can see it's really coming out very smooth. That was the all-purpose flour. Now for the whole wheat. This is what it's looking like. I mean, look how much smoother that looks. I'm gonna go wet my hand again real quick just because I have other dough on it. Here we go. We're going to pick up one side, stretch, and fold. Oops. Hard to do with one hand, so I can't keep the bowl steady. Stretch, fold, stretch, and fold, and stretch, and fold. So look at these doughs. They're already looking way different from when we first put them in here, and it was like just shaggy. It didn't look like a dough ball. It was like just a shaggy mixture, right? Now it's really starting to come together into shape. So we're going to do this 2 more times, 45 minutes apart. So number 4. All right, ladies, so it is 4:30 my time, which means my dough has been proofing for about 9 hours now, and my temperature has been around 73 degrees to 76-ish or so, and it's kind of been fluctuating. I've had the windows open, but I've been cooking. The heat's kicked on a couple of times, so it's not been a constant temperature, but it's been kind of warm in the house to on the cooler side of warm. And anyhow, I just want to show you what we have going on real quick. And then I'm going to show you how I shape my bread dough, and I'm going to put some of it in the refrigerator and get some of it ready to cook today. First of all, here is day 5 starter, what it's looking like. We've definitely started getting some bigger bubbles in there, which is so great. If you're seeing big bubbles like this in your sourdough starter, you're going to be seeing big bubbles like that in your breads. Here are the tortillas that I made I mixed up the batch yesterday on day 4, and then I cooked them today. So after I put them in the refrigerator overnight, I took them out, let them warm up, made them into little balls, set them out, and then I tried my very best to do circles. But I am the worst about doing tortillas in circles. My sister was here and trying to show me like a technique to get them like really good, but I don't know, maybe I just lack the patience, and if I would just give it a little bit more attention to detail, I'd get better circles. But they work just fine, and they're very, very yummy. Okay, and then now here's what we're looking like. This is the all-purpose flour bread dough, but I'm really impressed with my whole wheat flour dough. You can see I've got some bubbles showing up here, starting to come up to the surface. That's a great sign that it is proofing nicely. It's kind of jiggly. Honestly, I really just go off of time. I'm like, okay, it's been bulk proofing at a decent temperature for 9 hours now. That should be plenty of time for it to do its thing, and I need to get this done now, because if I don't, it's 4:30, I'm gonna have to do this, and I need dinner, and then I'm gonna have to get the baby to bed, and I might, if I don't do it now, I might miss the time of being able to do it until it's overproofed, and now I've got it falling. Instead of being domed up nice with those bubbles at the surface, it has fallen. It's become runnier as well, like almost soupy sometimes if you let it go way too long, because remember I was saying that a byproduct of fermentation is liquid, so it becomes soupy, it falls flat, and even if you can kind of like shape it into a ball and get it baking, it will still be flatter than if you had baked it when it was just perfectly fermented or even under fermented a little. So I usually go off of time, 8 to 12 hours, and when I have a good opportunity within that window, that's when I shape them and either get ready to bake them or put them in the refrigerator. So let's do that right now. Whole wheat first. So first thing I'm gonna do is wet my hands. You can also oil your hands, but it just helps, you know, to have it not stick to you. And I'm going to try to get this out of the bowl with this top side remaining on the top, okay? So, because this is kind of like my working side. I've been pulling up into this center, so I want to keep this top part still on top when I transfer it out. So I'm going to carefully scrape the edges and try to get that top side still on top. You can put flour down if you need to. Now this is for 2 loaves, and look at all these bubbles we have here. So I'm gonna cut this in half. Some people use like little dough things. So see all these bubbles we have here? I'm gonna try not to pop those bubbles as I'm working with it, but it's okay if I do, okay? It's not the end of the world. So this is my working side. So I'm gonna keep that facing up, and I'm gonna pull everything into that middle side. So coming up into the middle, into the middle. This is a pre-shaping, the first shaping, into the middle. Just kind of suggesting to it what shape I want it to have. Then I'm going to just give it a little, like that. There we go. So now, here's my working side. Pulling up to the center, up to the center, up to the center. And there we go. Okay, now I'm going to get a little bit of flour and put it down here and then set those back on top just so that I don't have too much sticking on my table. Then we'll do the all-purpose flour. Alright, so that's the first shaping for the whole wheat. Same thing here. This is, I've been pulling up into the center, so I want to keep this side up. And honestly, this feels like it could definitely still be proofing a little bit more, but it's okay. Okay. Okay, this is my side that I've been pulling up the whole time with the stretch and fold. Cut it in half. Okay. Let me get my hands wet. Hi, Judy. And pull into the center, suggesting to it what shape I want it to take. Turning it over. And pulling into the center, just going all around, suggesting to it what shape I want it to make, and there we go. So I have the first shaping for my 4 loaves of bread. All right. Now let's let these rest for 30 minutes. While these are resting, I'm going to go ahead and start the stove at 450 degrees. I'm going to put my Dutch oven and things like that in there to start preheating. I am baking in this cast iron Dutch oven, which has a lid, and this clay baker, which also has a lid. I like to bake in containers that have lids. I can use Dutch ovens, clay bakers, also roasting pans, you know, like the blue and white speckled roasting pans. I have some of those. Those work great. They also have a lid. My timer just went off. 30 minutes of resting is complete. So now I'm going to do a final shape for all of the doughs. 2 of them are going to go into the refrigerator and 2 of them are going to go into the oven. So let me show you the baskets / containers I'm going to be using for my 2 that are going in the refrigerator real quick. I'm going to use a couple of bread towels and a basket and just a simple bowl. You don't want your containers to be too large for the amount of dough that you have. This is a little big, but I use it and it works okay. And then this one, it should be just about the right size. I'm going to line them with some bread towels and then, you know, just keep them covered and put them in the refrigerator. So let's do that. All right, so uncover them here. You can see they've kind of relaxed a little bit. That's great. So I'm going to start with this all-purpose flour one. This is the one that's going to go in the refrigerator. I've got my towel here, and I'm going to put it in my basket. Okay. See if you can see that. Yep. Okay. Okay. I'm just going to put some flour down. Can y'all take them out and put some flour down? Take this up, turn it over, and this is again my seam side. This is an oval basket, so I'm going to stitch this together like for an oval shape. So I'm going to just turn this over. Then I'm going to pull in like I'm kind of sewing it together. And then when I get to the end here, I'm going to tuck and roll and kind of create some tension pushing into the dough. Then I'm going to kind of come in. My seam is going this way, so I'm going to come in this way, pick it up, turn it over, put it seam side up into my bowl, and cover it up. So there we go. That's that one. Now I'll get my other container. Do like this. I take this dough, put it down, and this one I'm going to do in a circle shape. So I'm just going to bring it into the center. I'm going to keep bringing it into the center to kind of create some tension on that other side. Okay, and then I'm going to bring it up. My hands are getting sticky. And I'm going to press into the sides to kind of encourage it to ball up a little bit. And now I'm turning it and pulling it against the table. Turning it, pulling it against the table. Turning it, pulling it against the table to create some more tension. Pick it up and plop it in, seam side up. Okay, so those 2 are going in the refrigerator. Now we're going to do the final shaping for our bread loaves that are going into the oven. I'm going to take out my containers and put them here on this baking sheet. And then I'm going to do the final shaping. Score the bread loaves and put them in their containers and put them in the oven. It's going to be a pretty fast process. We'll do the Dutch oven first. I'll do this loaf. So I'm putting it smooth side down, seam side up. Into the center really tight. Last time I did it kind of pulling it into the center more loosely. This time I'm going in tighter. Really tight. Okay, turning it over, and again I'm going to be keeping it on the table but twisting and pulling it toward me against the surface, and you'll feel a little bit of resistance. This is just helping it to ball up a little bit. Okay, then you can add some flour on top. People use rice flour because it doesn't absorb into the dough as much, so it makes a prettier score. Taking a sharp knife, which this is not too sharp, and I am scoring it. Okay, picking it up carefully, plopping it in. Putting the lid on and getting it to the oven as quickly as I can. Taking out the next one. putting a little bit more flour down. Smooth side down, seam side up. This is an oval, so again, I'm actually going to shape this a little bit differently, not just the way I did the last oval shape. I'm going to do it first as a kind of a round shape-ish, like that. Then I'm going to pull it in on the sides to make it more ovalish, just to give it a little bit more tension. Look at that big bubble right there. And now I'm rolling it, tucking it, rolling it, tucking it. Pressing against that seam. Dusting it with flour. Giving it a cut. Picking it up. Plopping it in. Putting the lid on. Putting it in the oven. These breads are in for 40 minutes with the lids on, and then I'm going to take the lids off and let them go for another 5 to 10 minutes just for some nice coloring on top. So this is the moment of truth. I'm excited to see how they turn out and see if our day 5 starter gives us some nice loaves of bread. And then tomorrow we're going to bake those other loaves that are in the refrigerator now and see how they turn out. And we'll be able to compare our all-purpose flour from our whole wheat flour and our baked the same day loaves from our baked the next day loaves. Oh, that's cute.
Yeah. Stop doing that.
Alright, here are our loaves, the whole wheat one and the all-purpose one. I personally think the all-purpose one looks a little bit prettier and nicer. This one, the dough was definitely more wet. It was a higher hydration dough. This one was a more dry dough, but I am overall very pleased for my 5-day-old starter. I got a nice oven spring on both of them. So I'm very happy with the bread that was produced by my 5-day-old starter. And tomorrow we will put the ones that are in the refrigerator now into the oven and see how they compare to these. So there we have the end of day 5, 2 wonderful loaves of bread, whole wheat and all-purpose that both turned out just fine, but a little bit differently from one another. I'm looking forward to seeing you tomorrow for day 6. Until next time, I pray that Yahweh will bless you and keep you. I'll talk with you later. Goodbye.